Broncos fans are shocked by this as Sean Payton, the head coach of the Denver Broncos, takes full responsibility for the blow-up first loss of the season against the Indianapolis Colts in their second game of the 2025 NFL season. And with this loss in mind and the fact that Sean Payton took full responsibility for what happened in those final minutes of the game against the Colts, it has huge implications looking forward for the Denver Broncos this season as they have some very tough games ahead of them and they have to figure out a lot of kinks within their game in order to try to get some crucial wins, both in division and out of division against some of these opponents coming up in the near future. Welcome into Broncos Digest, everybody, breaking down all things Denver Broncos, circling back to this loss against the Indianapolis Colts, what went wrong, whose responsibility it was, and why Sean Payton felt the need to come out and say that it was fully his fault, even though the play potentially wasn't his call in the end of the game that ultimately cost us this loss against Indy. But even though that last play of the game may not have been Sean Payton's decision, things leading up to that moment may have been caused by Sean Payton. And once again, stand-up coach coming in and taking responsibility for what happened against the Indianapolis Colts. So like I said, we're going to break everything down around this loss and what happened. Before we dive into everything today, just want to remind you guys to make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're already growing so fast. We're getting tons of views on our videos, but make sure that you are subscribing and joining the Broncos Digest family. This is the perfect time to join the Broncos Digest community. The season has started. We are 2 weeks in. We're growing so fast. This is the perfect time to become a part of this family. And there's 95% of you guys that are not a part of this Broncos Digest community yet. 95% of you tuning into the videos every day and not subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button. Join the Broncos Digest family. Thank you guys for supporting. This is the fastest growing source for Broncos news and updates on YouTube. So the best thing for you to do is obviously join the most fast growing source for Broncos news. All right, without further ado, let's dive into everything around Sean Payton taking responsibility for this loss and everything that happened leading up to that final 45-yard field goal after the 15-yard personal foul leverage penalty, which, might I add, still think that is the most ridiculous call that I've seen in a very long time. But you can't change the past. No reason to dwell on it. Better to just look forward and worry about the next game that the Broncos have. But the Broncos off to a little bit of a rocky start, as we know, and the schedule is only going to get more difficult. Not only did they only win against a very struggling Tennessee Titans team by one score, but they had the lead for essentially the entire game against the Colts, and several mistakes down the stretch ended up costing them a 1-point loss. And though the Colts marched up and down the field, did really well on the ground and on the air, Broncos fans wanted to talk about just the one play at the end that cost us the game. And, we already covered this on the channel. The Broncos got absolutely screwed by the refs in this game. A 60-yard, no good field goal by a rookie kicker, very young kicker for the Indianapolis Colts, called a leverage penalty on Denver. And, ever since this moment's kind of been unfolding, it's obviously been a few days now since this game, I've seen even more takes and even more opinions on this that I just really agree with. I think is really encapsulating the moment. One of the ones that I think is the most accurate is, even if the call was solicited, 15 yards for that penalty, that is ridiculous. You put them right in easy, perfect field goal range. Like, at least give it like 5 or 10 yards, or there's got to be, it was just baffling in so many different ways. And then another thing that I think that is really accurate as well is how late the call was. Very late throw of the flag by the ref. It was after the kick was long out of range and 100% going to be a miss. So just some fishy aspects of this whole call and everything that happened at the end of the Broncos game. But then Sean Payton comes out and he says this regarding the play. We had a certain field goal block in the event of a game-ending field goal. That is on me in this situation. It's not Darren Rizzi, who's the Broncos special teams coordinator. It's not on Tillman. His biggest regret flying home, it's more of a closer field goal, which I've seen this in the media as well. And as much as the call was inaccurate and ridiculous, in my opinion, it is a very strong point. There's no need to be touching anybody on the line and making a massive effort to block a field goal on a 60-yard field goal that's being kicked by someone who's barely been in the league as an NFL kicker. It's much more for an in-range gimme field goal than a 60-yard, ridiculously long attempt. And that's on Sean Payton. He's taking full responsibility for that, which I think is a stand-up move by the Denver Broncos coach. But it's not something that I expected. I think that this was on the special teams, and this was something that they had ready and something that they preached and that they coached, and it was a mistake they made. But a really good job by Sean Payton coming forward and taking responsibility for that call and for that mistake. It might be a rarely called penalty, 100% accurate as well. You can make the argument that the game shouldn't be decided on a play like that, but this is where another really interesting and really accurate point, in my opinion, comes into play. Why are you putting yourself in a spot for it to even be a possibility of being called when the other team's trying one from 60 yards out? If you go with a standard block and it doesn't work, you take your chances on a 60-yard kick. I think that is a really strong point from Sean Payton as well. But the other conversation around this whole entire thing, the other just encapsulating idea that goes back to all of this and how we lost this game is just the fact that we even put ourselves in a position to where a 60-yard field goal can win the game. And then obviously that call puts them in a give me 45-yard range, and that wins them the game. The Broncos had the lead for essentially the entire game, and it was the fourth quarter where things started to fall apart for Denver. How do you get yourself in that situation, and how is that going to be concerning for looking forward into these next few games against some really tough opponents? You look at a quote from Bo Nix right after the game, talking about the mid-game momentum shift. They lost all of their momentum. They played well for 3 quarters, but you have to finish in the fourth against a strong team like Indianapolis, who's setting NFL records and making themselves look like a legitimate playoff team to be scared of in the AFC. They're 2-0. They have no punts in their entire first 2 games. They've scored on almost every possession. But you talk about how the Broncos lost all their momentum in the fourth quarter. That is a topic to be scared of, because the Broncos were 1-6 in 1-score games last year. Is this going to be a problem again where they can't win 1-score games because they fall apart in the fourth quarter? That's a very concerning aspect of this team, and it's something that needs to be thought about regardless of any ridiculous leveraging calls, regardless of anything that happened in the end of that game. It's the things leading up to that moment that is concerning for Denver Broncos fans and for Denver Broncos players and just the whole team in general. Do the Broncos have a fourth quarter problem? And that's something that needs to be talked about and something that needs to be thought about. Sean Payton spoke on this as well. They had a number of opportunities to not be in that position where in the end of the game, they're risking a game-winning field goal. And unfortunately, they shot ourselves in the foot too many times, and that's why they ended up in that position. You think of the end of that game when there was multiple opportunities to take the game home and to clinch the fact that it was going to be a win. You have a Will Lutz 40-something yard in-range field goal. That is something that needs to be made every single time. Will Lutz is a consistent kicker. That is a ridiculous mistake from his standpoint. You're approaching the red zone in the fourth quarter and you throw your first and only interception of the game. Get that out of your system in the first quarter. Throw an interception on the first drive. Get that out of the way so you can capitalize on a close game in the fourth quarter and make it happen when it counts. That's the most important aspect of the offense for the Broncos, and they shot themselves in the foot, just as Sean Payton said in that regard. And then the defense as well. One of the roughest games for the Denver Broncos defense that I've seen in a long time. Shot themselves in the foot on the last drive for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, you see the Indianapolis running back Taylor run a 80, 90-yard burst all the way down almost to the end zone. That's unacceptable in the fourth quarter. That was essentially handing them the win as well, putting them in range to score a touchdown, kick a field goal, whatever. That is really rough stuff from the Denver Broncos. So regardless of Sean Payton taking accountability for what happened in the end of that game, he's also taking accountability for the fact that a lot of mistakes led up to that moment and to that opportunity for the Colts to even have the chance to win the game. And that raises a lot of concern for the future, for the next few weeks. You look at a team like the Los Angeles Chargers within our division. We have to play them twice, and the first of the 2 of the season is coming up in LA this weekend. This is potentially a season-defining game. Chargers are 2-0, and they've beat the Kansas City Chiefs already. Very strong performance by the Chargers in both of their first 2 games against the Raiders and the Chiefs. So they now have the division. They have a lot of experience against the AFC West already, and you got a guy like Justin Herbert who's having a really strong start to his season. This is concerning for the Broncos. And if they want to even have a sniff of a chance at beating the Chargers, they've got to work out these kinks. They've got to play a complete 60-minute, 4-quarter, full amount of football during this game. Otherwise, a loss here could potentially send them on a tough path throughout the remainder of the season. There's still a lot of hype and a lot of hope around this team and what they're trying to do this year with what I think is a Super Bowl caliber roster. But these kinks, this idea that they can't play a full game of football, that's the most concerning thing for me. And they need to figure out how to do so against what I think is going to be their toughest opponent of the season coming up in just a few days here.